Well, obviously he looked at the analytics and said this wasn't working. This isn't the way to attack them. On the 14 they ran, they averaged almost 8.5 yards per attempt. Like 8.5 yards per attempt. Liam Cohen got into his head and decided he was way too smart. So hello and welcome to All Four Quarters, your one-stop shop for news, views and overreactions to all things NFL. This week we're coming off our bye and ready to take on some of these wildcard pretenders in the divisional round. So hey, we got Connor here. I'm on a solo pod again this week. We're going to kind of jump into some news and then start tearing apart the games in a little bit more detail. Obviously, we're down to a much smaller number of games, and it's really kind of down to the contenders at this stage, so it's going to be quite exciting. There's nothing been too wild or crazy on my side at the moment. Cold snap came back a little bit in Dublin, but it's relaxed again now. I managed to feel my age by pulling my back on the driving range and then not being able to put my socks on and off without taking about 8 minutes and a lot of groaning. So that's, maybe contemplate my own mortality a little bit. But overall, it's been a nice, relaxing time here. Back into work, all going well, and heading down to Kerry for a 70th birthday party this weekend. So all go, go, go. But we've had a lot of exciting football to look at, and we'll start by jumping into a few bits of news. So, in the most inevitable way possible, just as I finished recording last week, a couple more pieces moved around in the coaching realm. Go into them in more detail at a later date. But I did flag a few of these, so I'm kind of happy that I was right on them. And so we said there was a couple more shoes to drop to the analysis from last week that Miami have decided belatedly to part ways with Mike McDaniels. This decision came after probably a period of time where we thought McDaniels was going to be safe. There was noise out of the ownership group that they were happy with what he was doing and they were going to let him, stay and roll for next year. This would suggest to me that either they have looked at some of the people who are available this coaching cycle and have decided that they want to move with one of them, probably possibly our next person who we're going to talk about coming out of Baltimore, or they've identified someone in their GM search that has coaches in mind that they would like to work with. But either way, Mike McDaniels has parted ways with them. He will become quite an attractive option this hiring cycle because there's not a ton of offensive minds out there at the moment. That being said, whether someone will give him a head coaching job or whether he might have to look at an offensive coordinating position, we'll talk about that kind of as we push more towards the off season. The big surprise one was probably Baltimore parting ways with Harbaugh. Not that surprising. I think it was week 3 of this season I started talking about this being a possibility. Harbaugh's been there for nearly 20 years at this stage. Obviously won a Super Bowl early on in his run with them. They've been unfortunately unable to kind of get over the hump in the playoffs, and this was kind of something that felt inevitable, particularly following the article that went out in the local papers, kind of trashing the quarterback Lamar Jackson. It felt like at that stage it was going to be something that wasn't going to stay as a marriage, so to speak. So Harbaugh obviously commands a lot of interest in the league. People are very happy with the program he's built there, the continued success they've had. He's going to have his choice of landing spots, frankly. The interesting bit that's leaked out is that he will have a relatively high list of demands for what he wants. I believe he'll want to be able to pick his own GM. He wants to be able to hire his own staff. He wants a very large amount of money to pay his staff and to pay his coaches. And I think he's looking for a decent chunk of change himself. Now, that said, he has the track record of success. He has a Super Bowl ring and so on. So you're talking about a coach that, one, doesn't normally come on the market very often, this style of coach. The last one of this style or this kind of pedigree would probably have been Andy Reid leaving Philadelphia and going to the Chiefs. However, he's a different type of coach. So Harbaugh started out as a special teams coordinator, isn't kind of a QB guru. He's not an offensive guy specifically. He likes to hire good coordinators and put himself in more of a kind of a management role, rather than kind of being the offensive side of the ball and someone else handles the defensive side or vice versa, which is a lot more common these days. So it's an interesting one. He's a little bit older, so there might be question marks about whether or not his Rolodex is full of the up and coming stars that of coaching that a franchise might want looking towards the future. But you're looking at a safe set of hands here with a lot of upside. And the other big surprise was following their loss in the wildcard round. Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin have decided to consciously uncouple. So Tomlin, he has not been fired. He decided to step down as the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, this was a tumultuous year for him. We had fans chanting "Fire Tomlin" at certain points, but they didn't make the playoffs. They get roundly beaten in the playoffs, which does extend his record to, I believe he's now got the most losses in the wild card of any coach in history. But he is also up on the, I believe, top 10 of the wins of all time. So he's a very interesting option at coach because I think he's shown himself to be an incredible floor raiser. He's never had a losing season. He had one season where it was 500, but everything else has been a winning season, and that's across 19 years. So that's a very impressive resume to have. The question mark might be, does he have the edge to be able to get up to that upper level again? Because obviously he won his Super Bowl and got to another one, but that was with Ben Roethlisberger, with a roster that had been constructed by the previous ownership, and there'll be question marks over the roster that he's left behind here. There are good pieces to it, but there's a lot of money tied up in aging players such as TJ Watt. There's not a quarterback, and he's struggled since Roethlisberger's retirement, and even struggled when Roethlisberger was injured. So I think he'd have his choice of jobs. The interesting element to this, though, is as he stepped down, Pittsburgh actually retain his rights as a coach. So if he wanted to go and coach somewhere else, they would have to allow that. They have the ability to say no. And what that will result in is if another team wants him, they're probably going to have to trade for him. We saw a trade happen for Sean Payton to the Denver Broncos. They had to send, I can't remember, it was a second or a third round pick to New Orleans in exchange for releasing his rights to them. Tomlin has obviously contacts in media, and that's where a lot of people think he's going to go for this year at any rate. But we'll see what happens. I will say, when we go back to the start of this season, I did not think, looking at the AFC North, that it would be Zach Taylor being the only coach who's remaining in situ and the last man standing amongst the coaching ranks of the AFC North. There's been lots of other ones that we'll talk about later on. Eagles have fired offensive coordinator Patullo. Chargers have fired offensive coordinator Greg Roman. Lots of movement happening around the league. The only other kind of bit of news from that side is Adam Thielen has retired, which I think everyone saw was on the cards. He moved team mid-season, took a pay cut to try and go to a contender. It didn't work out because it was the Vikings, and is now retiring at the end of a long and productive but not Hall of Fame level career. The only other bit of news I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of a controversy corner, it's kind of not. It will be discussed in the games. I'm integrating most of the injury stuff into the games because obviously that's where the only injuries that are happening this time of year are coming from outside of extracurriculars. And the Buffalo Bills already have quite a thin wide receiver room. This week saw Gabe Davis and Terrell Shavers both tear ACLs, which means at the time of recording, I believe they only have 3 wide receivers on their roster, something they'll need to rectify. There's a couple of guys out there they can get some bodies, and I'm sure they'll elevate some people from the practice squad and so on. But the bit that threw me off was discovering that Shaver's injury and the injury to his ACL happened in the first half, yet he played on through the second half of this game and did catch passes during that period as well. And it does baffle me in this day and age that this was allowed to happen. How can you have a player out there with an injury this serious still being allowed to take snaps? There are independent medical experts sitting in the crowd specifically to stop teams being able to make biased decisions against the medical interest of their players. How did no one spot this during the game? It's absolutely ridiculous. The coaches obviously come out since and said, "Oh, isn't it remarkable? He's such a gamer. Oh, I can't believe he'd do that." And I kind of go, yeah, look, it's impressive and all, but it's incredibly fucking stupid. This is not something that should be happening in this day and age, and you should have medical staff able to spot that a mile off and stop him from playing. Speaking of medical stuff, one thing that's not going to come into the games this week because it'll be dependent on them surviving another one, the 49ers, who will talk about how bad their linebacker situation is at the moment. They have opened up Fred Warner's practice window, which means he's now back with the team. He's doing drills. He's getting himself ready to play. He's almost certainly not going to be playing this week. week. I don't think it's entirely off the cards, but it's not expected. But it means that if they were to win this week, and we'll talk about that in the game previews, they would be able to bring back one of their key defensive pieces for the championship games. And on that lovely note, let's dive in and have a look at Wildcard weekend and all the crack that we had during it. So first up, Carolina 31, Los Angeles 34. This game was a lot closer than we expected. After pulling out to a 14 to nothing lead, the Rams allowed the Panthers right back into the game. The struggles of this game are encapsulated with a series or two at the end of the second quarter, where the Panthers forced two incompletions and a punt from the Rams, which Etienne then proceeded to bounce off his face mask and hand back to the Rams, who recovered the kickoff. Huge swing play. The Rams then turn it over on downs with this perfect field position where they could have, at bare minimum, gone up by additional 3 points. This gave the ball back to Carolina, who then went on a full boomer bust drive. The series went 0 yards, 29-yard penalty, 37-yard pass, incompletion, 16-yard touchdown run, and allowed them to go into the half at 17-14 rather than, 20-7 at bare minimum. It was just, both teams making sloppy mistakes at inopportune times, and the Rams, in kind of surprising fashion, failing to make the most of their opportunities when these chances occurred, and the Panthers mostly actually getting, scores out of the tail end of them. When they turned them over on downs, they scored a touchdown. When they got an interception, they scored a touchdown. When they blocked a punt, they scored a touchdown. The Panthers knew in this game that they had to make the most of every opportunity that was given them. They maybe tried to bite off more than they can chew. They were going for it on fourth down in the first quarter of this game. Like, the Rams were clearly the more talented team, but for most of this game, they were just stuck in second gear. Stafford went 24-42 for 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And he had a middling game where he didn't really show the killer instinct that won him the first team All-Pro this year. He wasn't helped out by his wide receiver room, who got a very bad case of the drops in this. Puka Nacua caught 10 of 18 passes for 111 yards and a touchdown, and Adams 5 of 13 for 72 yards. Both had multiple drops through either concentration errors or maybe not quite running their routes crisply enough. But when it came down to make or break time on the final drive, they were absolutely money. It was a 7-play, 71-yard drive. They completed 6 of 7 passes on it. Then they had a good special teams kickoff, which meant Bryce Young had 30 seconds and the ball on his own 21-yard, I think it was, or maybe it was 18-yard. So he'd have to have picked up 40 yards or so just to get them in field goal range. And yeah, it just ends with 4 incompletions in this one. It was not quite what you'd want to see at that stage, but it was enough, and it wasn't really Bryce Young's fault. Like, overall, it was a strong game for Young. 21 of 40 passing for 264 yards, a touchdown and an interception. And he had 24 yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. The big problem for them was that they weren't able to establish the run as much as they would have liked. Like, this team, when it was at its best, is relying on the defense, having a big churning running game, and then like putting Young in a complementary position rather than a key linchpin spot. They did get 2 touchdowns for Chuba Hubbard in this game, but they just weren't being able to lean on the run that much. He wasn't, Young wasn't fazed by the environment or the spectacle of it. It was a home game, which I think probably helps. And he had the team leading with 3 minutes left in the game, but the defense just weren't able to close it out for them despite playing quite well throughout the rest of the game. They did well though, and the special teams did their job. Like I mentioned, they got a blocked punt to put them up late, somewhat making up for the muffed punt return earlier. They turned the ball over that thankfully didn't turn in for the points for them. For the Rams, it's a worrying development considering that they're going to be at the Bears next week, who are a team who should be able to better pick on their secondary and probably won't give the Rams as many chances. For the Panthers, this was a strong season of highs and lows, and surprisingly, they're kind of finishing on a higher note here. Despite this being a loss, this definitely feels like a much more positive note to end their season on than where they were at the end of the regular season. So arrow up for them. For the Rams, they're better than their performance here, and hopefully we're going to get to see that next week. Green Bay next, 27 versus Chicago, 31. Green Bay had this in the bag. This is an all-time collapse for them. It was 21-6 entering the fourth quarter, and they allowed a resurgent Bears team to score 25 points on them in 13 and a half minutes. McManus missed an extra point on their final touchdown drive, leaving them trailing by 4, which meant they weren't going to be able to kick a field goal. And that's the thing. They were in field goal range. They had driven it to the Bears' 28-yard line, weren't able to get the conversion, ran out of time. It was just heartbreaking. This was a colossal collapse and one that will definitely haunt LaFleur and will probably colour the ongoing contract negotiations that he's having with Green Bay ownership. The first half for them went exactly to plan. The Bears scored a field goal on their opening drive and then proceeded on their next couple of drives to go interception, turnover on downs. Whereas Green Bay scored touchdowns on their first 3 possessions and got into a field goal position with their fourth, unfortunately missing a 55-yarder at the buzzer. This was very much not a good day for Brandon McManus, their kicker, who missed 2 field goals, so that 55-yarder and a 44-yarder in the fourth quarter that could have also saved their bacon, and the extra point that I missed earlier. And normally, if you see something like that, you'd say, well, it's going to be tough conditions and so on. But Cairo Santos was on the other side, and Cairo Santos, ex-kicker of the Chiefs back in the day, doesn't have the world's biggest leg. He was 3 for 3 on field goals, including a 51-yarder and 2 for 2 in extra points. So it wasn't just a bad weather thing. McManus just had a bad day at the office. But when you look at the form book, realistically, what were we expecting from this game? Like, Green Bay were coming off 4 straight losses. This makes it 5 straight losses, including losing to the Bears 3 weeks ago. On the other side, Chicago, like, we call them the cardiac bears, and it's not for nothing. There was no way that they were going to be dominant in a game, but they were going to make it exciting and they were going to try and come back. Love looked good in his first game back post concussion. He threw for 323 yards and 4 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs and the run game were getting shut down pretty effectively. He only averaged 2.9 yards a carry, but the gadget plays and the sweeps were working, so they were able to get the ball outside and use a lot of kind of wide receivers and so on to try and get the running game established. Romeo Dobbs had a big day from them, 8 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. And we also saw Matthew Golden's first NFL touchdown on a swing pass, where he managed to make about 7 defenders miss him en route to the end zone. In a play that kind of looked like it was going to seal the game, but the Bears had more in the bag. They survived sloppiness in this game, 4 fumbles, none of them got lost. And the Green Bay defense got 2 interceptions as well as 9 QB hits. It was overall a very solid performance from the defense. They were missing Parsons, yeah, but like, they definitely had enough in the playbook to cover this. They had enough in the personnel. It just fell apart in the fourth quarter for them. Obviously, special teams gaffes cost them. 7 points were lost on missed kicks in this one. In discipline, reared its ugly head again. 7 penalties, resulted in 65 yards worth of penalties for them. That cost them as well. But again, they also lacked killer instinct. This was a game where Green Bay won the turnover battle by 2 and end up losing. And even if they had won, winning by such a fine margin when you've got a +2 turnover differential and your defense is working well, you've got to do better. Like, their splits between their first half and their second half were crazy. In the second half, they scored 6 points and only got about 34% of their yardage. Like, in the second half is when points go up and yardage go up for teams because defenses get tired, and it was almost the opposite here. Most of that is to do with the Bears. The Bears were like 2 different animals from first half to second half. Their first half was 122 yards of total offense. Their second half, 333 yards. They scored 3 points in the first half. They scored 28 in the second half. They went from, in the first half, having no drive reach 60 yards to having 4 scoring drives over 60 yards in the second half. I don't know what they put in their water bottles. I don't know what the halftime coaching speech was, but my God, it looked great. Williams 24-48 for 361 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, as well as 20 yards on the ground. Looked imperious in the fourth quarter. Couldn't make a mistake then. They weren't quite able to establish the run like they wanted to. Like, this is again a team that likes to build off the run. They only had 21 carries in this game and they only averaged 3.8 yards a carry. That somewhat feels game script dependent on this one. They got down early, like I said, 21-3 at the halftime. They had to be passing to try and, catch up, and that'll happen. And then by the time they were catching up in the fourth quarter, Williams was just the hot hand. You couldn't take him out of there. Loveland had 8 catches for 137 yards, and DJ Moore, who frankly, most commentators thought was on the outs here, had a big day, 6 of 7 for 64 yards, and was their most reliable hands on the offensive side. Their defense bottled up the run up the middle. Like I said, they weren't able to do as much on the outside, but they stopped the middle runs, which were good. But that was really all their defense did until the second half. In the second half, they tightened up. They only allowed one first down in the third quarter. They were getting into Love's throwing lanes and breaking up passes, including the game-sealing knockdown by Jaquan Brisker at the end. So when you look at this game, the Packers had it and lost it, and they have the excuse of injuries. But I will say I don't think that would have made the difference here. I don't think Parsons was the difference making here. For the Bears, they progressed to the next round. Everyone's rallying around their coach, who's in the locker room shouting "fuck the Packers." But they need to work on what caused the slow start here, and they need to work out how to play a complete game, because there are glimpses, quarters where you just see this Bears team and go, wow, that's incredible. That'll be fantastic. And then there's quarters where they're just dead and nothing is working. And they need to find a level of consistency, because it creates a small dynamic in me where I think about possible Super Bowl matchups, and I think of the potential of a Bears Broncos Super Bowl. And I'm in two minds, because it would be the most boring Super Bowl for most of it, but then would give us the greatest fourth quarter of all time, because both of those teams are set up that way. The Bears could just find consistency. They could be a real threat to a couple of other teams in these playoffs. Next up, Buffalo at Jacksonville, 27-24. With 4 minutes left and down by 3 points, the Jags kicked the ball off to the Bills, and we all strapped in waiting for this defense to close it out. They've been doing it for most of the day. They've been all over Allen throughout the game, evidenced by the amount of injuries and treatments he was getting. He had to get checked out for a potential concussion. He has an injured hand from a defensive line or an offensive lineman getting pushed back into him as he was throwing the ball. He had a twisted ankle/leg injury from whenever he was up at the goal line. Almost certainly has bruised ribs from the amount of hits he was taking. And possibly it was because the Jags expected what we did here, which I know I was looking at this going slow, methodical drive, eat the clock, don't let the Jags have any time left on it. That the Jags defense were just completely caught out whenever they started to go deep in this game. They got a 36-yard pass to Brandon Cooks a few short plays later, a tush push that was eventually ruled down at the 1 yard line, and all of a sudden there was 1 minute left on the clock for the Jags to respond down by 3 points. And it just wasn't happening. An interception sealed it, but it felt like time had already run out on Duval's season. Lawrence overall performed well here, despite some mistakes. He went 18 of 30 for 207 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Although, like I said, that last one was in kind of desperation mode to try and get up the field with a minute left and no timeouts. Parker Washington was his favorite target in this one, caught 7 passes for 107 yards and a touchdown. And the defense, they really brought the pressure in this game. They only turned it into 1 sack, but they were causing Allen issues all day long. The confusing element of this game, really, and where I think it fell apart from the Jag side, was the play calling from Liam Cohen. The Bills' defense are absolutely terrible against the run, but for some reason, Cohen just staunchly refused to use it. He did use some toss crack stuff. He did a couple of outside runs, particularly with Tootin, and he was enjoying doing that, but he refused to run it up the gut. And like, the Bills can't defend up the gut runs. They couldn't defend the edge ones that much, but they only ran 14 designed runs with running backs in this game. And you kind of go, oh, well, obviously he looked at the analytics and said, this wasn't working. This isn't the way to attack them. On the 14 they ran, they averaged almost 8.5 yards per attempt. Like 8.5 yards per attempt. That's an incredible thing to have. Why not do it more? Just Liam Cohen got into his head and decided he was way too smart. To add to the infuriation, like, you're looking at him going, run the damn ball, and then he calls a lump of designed QB runs that don't work. Like, it was absolutely terrible decision making. Like, a lot is being made of this being a great season for the Jags, and don't get me wrong, it is. This Jags team under Cohen is a far more exciting prospect than anything we've seen in recent years. But questions have to ask about why Cohen thought he was way too smart to exploit the weakness in the defense facing them. And like I said, anytime he did it, he found success in it. So it just baffles the mind. Most of our group chats during this were just jokes about how can you be this obviously giving up the run and just not take it. Their defense also kept the run in check from the other side, both running backs and Josh Allen, holding them to 3 yards per carry. And obviously, they gave up 2 touchdowns to Allen in short yardage on those kind of tush push type situations. But overall, their defense did their job. Cam Little also kind of quite surprisingly let the side down in unusual circumstances in this game. Coming into halftime, they rushed up to snap the ball on a clock that, I'm sorry, Jags fans, absolutely definitely had expired at that point. Because if they could get a snap off the defensive players offside, and a defense, you can't end a half or end a game on a defensive penalty, which would mean that they would be able to get a free kick that allowed them to kick a 54-yard field goal to tie it up at halftime. But unfortunately, it pushed left and doinked off the upright. It was a cruel, but ultimately, I feel, karmically correct way for that series to end. A tight fourth quarter saw 4 touchdowns scored in succession, and the Bills team escaped with the win. Allen looked good in this game. Well, I say he looked good playing. He looks absolutely beat to shit and kind of in pain. But he went 28 of 35 for 273 yards and a touchdown, 11 carries for 33 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And it was kind of the only show in town for the Bills in this game, and it showed. 75% of the plays went through him between running and passing. Shakir had 12 catches for 82 yards, but no one else had more than 3 catches. I mentioned earlier that they had two ACL injuries. One of their wide receivers playing in this game was playing with a torn ACL, or at least a severely injured ACL. Ray Davis lost a fumble on their third drive, but the defense stopped them with a 10-yard sack, forcing a punt on the subsequent series. So, like, the defense was able to do their job in this, but they couldn't stop a cold in the run game. Like, it didn't really matter because of the Jags' game plan, but boy, howdy, is this run defense poor. The final drive was classic heroics from Josh, but, with the injuries mounting, and what you see is glaring holes on around him on this squad in both wide receiver position and defensive stoutness against the run. It's hard not to worry about their game at Denver this week. Like, will Allen be healthy enough to lead the squad to victory, and could they even get a run game going themselves, because they weren't able to this week? I think against most other playoff teams, the Bills lose this game is the problem. Because I'm excited, Allen is playing well and whatnot, and I'll get into it into the previews. But like, I think almost any other playoff level team would have beaten this Bills team, because you know they would have just run the fucking ball. The Jags obviously seem very happy with how the season has gone. They're pissed off that they didn't get over the line, but like, you see the reporting on their press conference there, where the local media is saying like, "Well done, Liam. You did a great job. Next year is going to be even better," and so on. And that's all lovely and heartwarming, and isn't it nice? But this is a Jags team that are now going to have to sit for the next couple of months and think about the decisions they made in this game, and be kicking themselves for letting it slip away. 8.5 yards a carry for your running backs, and you run it 14 times. Like, clock management was an issue at times. Some of the decision making was questionable. I understand that they were going through issues with wide receivers and injuries and whatnot. 8.5 yards a carry, and those players were healthy, and those players were on the field, and you weren't using them, and you were calling designed runs and having Lawrence spin around in the circle. You better hope that Denver don't just run the ball down their throat for 250 yards, because that'll just highlight the mistake you made. Bills are exciting. Josh Allen is electric. I'm just not sure there's enough pieces around them afterwards. And the injuries he's taking here, how healthy will he be? Can he put the team on his back? And how much weight can he lift at this stage? Next up, San Francisco 23, Philadelphia 19. I've never been so happy to be right about the team. Philly suck. Philly absolutely suck. Their coaching is awful, and I'm glad we don't have to talk about them anymore after this week. They led this game from the second quarter into the fourth quarter, and they were unable to capitalize on our position at all. They settled for 2 field goals and 4 punts as the 49ers just climbed their way back into the game with 2 fourth quarter touchdowns. It was a tense back and forth affair, neither side looking entirely dominant at any time. The 49ers have had injury troubles. I think I mentioned in the preview last week, there's no linebacker on this team that was on the initial 53-man roster. They have injuries all over the shop, but the Eagles were not able to capitalize at all. The run game was mostly kept in check to 4 yards a carry. They only had one big run in the entire game, which is a surprise given the personnel issues on the San Francisco defense. And Hurts looked pedestrian as well in this one. He went 20 of 35 for 168 yards and one touchdown, and he had 14 yards rushing. It was not a good day at the office at all, with AJ Brown dropping two key passes and an absolutely abysmal average depth of target. They were just taking short, quick, underneath stuff. The deep shots were mostly going awry. I think they only had one completed pass over 30 yards, or go for over 30 yards. Yeah, like they like looking through their drive charts, they only really had one good drive in the second half. Like you could maybe argue that the last drive was successful, albeit it didn't get the result they wanted. But yeah, their defense is basically the only reason that they were in this game at all. They picked off Purdy twice in the second half, but they weren't able to do anything with it. They only converted those two turnovers into 3 points. You can see why Patullo is getting thrown under the bus. In this one, the offense didn't look good. Also, kind of on a more level above that, Sirianni is the one who should be gone here, but this is always the first step. You always get rid of your offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator first to kind of buy yourself a bit of time. I would say that like what you saw in this game was the offense that Jalen Hurts wants to run, and it just doesn't work. We saw one series, which was I believe was the one good series I mentioned in the second half, where they found success, and that was running a little bit more of a motion style of offense rather than the kind of straight read, throw it deep or throw it short thing that the Hurts wants. But it's not been good for the offense. Their defense is the only reason they were in this at all. The 49ers defense did a remarkably good job containing the offense. However, it didn't convert into big numbers. It'll pop off the page. Their pass rush is substandard. They weren't getting the pressure on them, so they only had one sack and two QB hits and three tackles for a loss. But they limited all the big plays, and they knew that that's what they needed to do. This offense from Philadelphia is not good. It's not disciplined. And if they force them to slowly work their way down the field and matriculate, that they would beat themselves. And that's essentially what happened. The 49ers offense was limited as well. That being said, turnovers were basically the reason why this game was so close. Purdy went 18 of 31 for 262 yards, two touchdowns, and two interceptions. He leaned on Robinson, who caught 6-7 for 111 yards and a touchdown, and Christian McCaffrey, who caught 6 of 8 balls for 88 yards and two touchdowns. Through the air, the ground game was less successful for them. This Eagles defensive front is really good, and they were able to lock in. Christian McCaffrey had 15 carries for 48 yards, and they had to get super inventive in this game to try and get the ball moving, because a lot of what they had planned to do in this game was probably to flow through George Kittle, and George Kittle unfortunately had an Achilles injury very early in this game, and had to leave. That meant they had to go deep into their bag of tricks. My personal favorite being a double reverse throwback that they did, where Jennings passed to Christian McCaffrey for the go-ahead touchdown on in the fourth quarter and really brought them into it. It was very, very fun stuff. It's maybe not what you want to have to be doing in the wild card round. It does feel a little bit like, keep your powder a little bit dry. Kittle's injury was costing them. This defense from Philly was really doing its job very well, so they had to kind of empty out the bag of tricks a little bit. On the Philadelphia side, like AJ Brown and Sirianni were fighting on the sidelines, and if rumors are to be believed, he's probably getting shipped out of there this offseason. Philly are going to rally around Sirianni and say he might be a prick, but he's our prick, and they'll look to run it back next season without really the necessary introspection they need. Like they need to figure out why this is, and I think it comes down to Sirianni, and I think it comes down to Hurts maybe having a little bit too much control over what's happening there. And yeah, like I think I'm afraid that they're going to look at the success they've had over recent years and the fact that they won a lot of games this year, even though there were a lot of games that they shouldn't have won, and they just kept finding ways to win them. It just wasn't good, and I fear they're not going to take the long hard look needed to fix things for next season. The 49ers on the other side, look, they're through, they're happy, but they're down another key contributor. Looking next week to take on a team that held them to 3 points the last time they met, and that was only 2 weeks ago. This is a big ask for them and possibly might be a bridge too far. Next up, the Chargers, 3 points against New England 16. This was a cagey game from the off. There was no scores in the first quarter, with only 3 field goals scored in the first half total. The Patriots just kept getting in their own way in this one. They had an interception on their second drive. They fumbled on their opening possession of the second half, but thank Christ the Chargers offense were absolutely unable to do anything with it. Yeah, this was an incredibly poor performance from the Chargers offense, and in particular from Justin Herbert. He's now 0-3 in playoff games, and obviously, like I mentioned in the news section, this saw the firing of offensive coordinator Greg Roman. Their line coach Mike Devlin is gone as well, and obviously they've had problems with injuries on that line, but they weren't really able to get anything sorted for it. The line was a problem. Obviously, it would be given it's on, I think it's 25th configuration at this point. But Herbert took 6 sacks in this game and 11 QB hits. Their running game wasn't able to get going either, only 2.8 yards a carry for Kamani Vidal. This is the thing, Herbert was missing open receivers throughout this game. There's super cuts up online of this where you can just see from the all 22 footage him standing in the pocket, him having two receivers open and just not being able to pull the trigger on either of them. He went 19 of 31 attempts for 159 yards and no touchdowns. He also ran for 57 yards on 10 carries as he was bailing early and often. Some of that is to do with the line, some of that is to do with him not seeing the receivers properly, and some of it is just him doing his best Josh Allen impression. He had two fumbles in this game as well. One of them lost, one of them recovered, and from their wide receiver core, look, no one had over 3 catches and no receiver went over 32 yards. This offense went 1 of 10 on third down and 0 of 2 in the red zone. So they were just going absolutely nowhere. Like this Chargers team just was not ready for this for this playoff experience. They just weren't prepared at all. I just think like they rested their starters for this and everything. I don't think that worked for them at all. The defense did their best though. Owe got 3 of their 5 sacks in this game. Hanley gave them their interception as well. It was a decent performance from the defense, obviously holding New England to 16 points. Some of that self-inflicted, I will say, but it was a solid performance. It was just their offense was absolutely turgid. My concerns on the other side is I would start to get a little bit worried if I was a Patriots fan. This game was being handed to them on a silver platter and they weren't able to shut it down. Like they went 4 of 11 on third down with a lot of mistakes here. Like it was a good performance in parts, solid, but a lot of mistakes. May went 17 of 29, so a little bit over 50% for 268 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. But this line, which has been solid against a not great pass rush from the Chargers, he took 5 sacks in this one. The run game was working well in this one. Stevenson got over 5.3 yards a carry, and yeah, like it was impressive. But you'd think, well, our line is okay. This is not a great team. Our running game is working. Why is Drake May taking so many sacks? Why are we not able to get points on the board? Like Drake May had to fire this offense up by using his legs as well. And I know he's a good scrambler and whatnot, but like 10 carries for 66 yards is a little bit too much running, I would say, and definitely putting a little bit too much on him to try and win a game against a Chargers team that's only putting up 3 points. He had to run, he made a big 37-yard run to spark the offense when it was needed, and they kind of got it moving at that stage. But it was not an impressive performance from them offensively either. The criticism that the Patriots have faced this season is that they haven't played anyone good. And frankly, that doesn't feel like it's changed. This Chargers team is not a playoff caliber team. This win does not feel like a playoff win as such. The upcoming matchup with the Texans will have them face an incredibly strong defense, but an incredibly lackluster offense. So even then, we'll kind of see what this offense looks like against a good defense, but we won't actually know what they look like against a top end team. For the Chargers side, look, they have some work to do as well here. Herbert's worst games in recent memory are his last 2 playoff games. And while injuries play a part, there are definitely deeper issues here. Firing your line coach when you lost both your tackles and your backup tackles and your backup guards and whatnot, that's probably not going to fix the problem. Firing the offense coordinator might help, but again, I don't think what he wanted to run as a scheme here was massively different from what most of what's going to be available out there will want to run. So we'll see what happens there. I just think this Chargers team does still feel like it's still rocking the old curses from back in its Philip Rivers day, and maybe they can get over him, but I think they're going to need to maybe do more than just fire the offensive line coach and change OC again. Houston 30, Pittsburgh 6. This is the way Rodgers' world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Rodgers targeted Freiermuth, but was intercepted by Bullock, who returned it in for a touchdown, making it a 24-point lead for Houston with 2 minutes left and bringing out Mason Rudolph to close it out. There is something poetic about Rodgers' last pass in the NFL potentially being a pick six, but yeah, this was a game that was utterly dominated by defense. The Houston D sacked Rodgers 4 times and delivered 12 QB hits. They had that interception that I mentioned. They also strip sacked Rodgers earlier in the game and returned it for a touchdown. Like all this while Rodgers was essentially playing a game plan entirely to avoid taking contact but failing. He went 17 of 33 in this game for 146 yards. So that's 4.4 yards an attempt, an interception and a fumble. The run game was stuffed as well, averaging only 3.5 yards a carry. And this was a tough watch to watch Pittsburgh's offense go. They had 175 yards total offense in this game to 408 from the Texans. They went 2 of 14 on third down conversions, 0 of 2 in the red zone. Rodgers was a statue, and Houston's defense, who are an incredibly high quality unit, were able to, take liberties in this one because they were able to leave escape lanes open. They were able to leave rushing lanes open to Rodgers because he wasn't going to take them. This was a rough end to Rodgers' career. If this is the end, you can kind of see that he just didn't have the mobility in him. He doesn't want to feel the contact. He can't stay in the pocket and wait till the last second to let the ball go. And that was his calling card back in the day, and yeah, just not great. The defense came up big in key moments. The 3 sacks and 1 interception for the other side. Like Pittsburgh's defense were good here. Stroud fumbled the ball 5 times, losing 2 of them. And despite all those struggles, Stroud went 21 of 32 for 250 yards, had a touchdown and interception. Woody Marks had 19 carries for 112 yards and a touchdown, averaging nearly 6 yards a carry. And Chubb, who I'd half forgotten was even on this team at this stage, worked great as a change of pace back, looking kind of back to his old self, 10 carries for 48 yards. It was a big Kirk game. He caught 8 passes for 144 yards and a touchdown, but no one else really did much on this team. The defense provided 2 touchdowns, and Kami Fairbairn, who has been excellent all year, missed an extra point at one stage in this. Like, it's very hard to watch this and take a huge amount away from it. This Pittsburgh Steelers team is not a quality enough team to be considered a playoff team, frankly. They just weren't up to snuff here at all. What I will say is, watching this Houston team, I just couldn't help but think this could be a really incredible team if they can just get anything going on the offense at all. Like, they had 2 good drives in this game. One was a 14-play drive, 92 yards and a touchdown. The other was an 11-play, 87-yard drive that got them a touchdown. And those were properly good, well planned out, nice mix of run and pass, nice movement to try and open up spaces. It was really, really well done. And I kind of went, oh yeah, we've got something here. And then you look at every one of their other drives: 3 punts, 2 fumbles, an interception. This offense, which, like I said, can do it, we've seen them do it, scored on 3 of 9 drives. And that isn't going to cut it against better teams. You have an incredible defense. Just help them out a little bit. Give them a bit of breathing room. Let them have a bit of time on the side to have their oxygen, particularly if, and if you are to be successful here, you're going to have to go up to Mile High. Like, you're going to need to do better if you're going to beat better teams. And this Houston team, it has the defense to go all the way. It just needs its offense to find a little bit of spark. The Steelers on the other side, look, obviously they're going into full reset mode. I mentioned Tomlin is gone. Rodgers is almost certainly gone. It's an interesting one because, yes, they're not winning Super Bowls, but they're being very competitive. They haven't had a losing season under him. The period of elite mediocrity is over, and now they get to open the mystery box. And what's inside it? It could be anything. It could even be elite mediocrity. Who knows? But yeah, the Steelers are turning the page and moving into a new era. For Houston, hopefully they can recapture some of the early Stroud excitement and get this offense going, because there's been a game or two where it's looked good, and if this offense could do anything, if this offense could score 17 points a game and this defense could score once a game, that might be enough to go all the way. And on that lovely note, let's go and look at the divisional round previews. First up, we have our AFC, Bills at Broncos. Top-end defense meets exciting high-powered offense in Mile High. Josh Allen will face a Denver defense that allows the second least amount of yards per game, 278. They are second against the run, allow just 18.3 points per game. The Bills have the fourth highest yards per game, boosting the top run game in the league at 160 yards a matchup and scoring over 28 points a game. So this is going to be Very exciting. This is, strength on strength at there. Last week it all ran through Josh Allen, and I talked in the previews there about he got banged up. That likely is not a situation that's going to get better this week. Their line isn't holding up, and the Broncos, this defense, oh my God, they have 68 sacks on the season. Just to put that in context, the team that they just beat, that beat the living shit out of him, the Jags, that got after him, that had him in the blue medical tent and had his leg checked out and had his hand checked out and had his ribs banged up and all that kind of stuff. They had less than half that amount of sacks this season. This is an absolute animal pass rush that's coming out of the Broncos, and Allen is going to probably have to take quite a lot of shots. He's probably going to have to play hero ball, and that's going to be a massive problem for them. He doesn't have wide receivers at the moment to get the ball out too quickly, so he's going to have to avoid the rush, and he's already on a bum leg, and his hand is a bit damaged. Like, I'm not liking this matchup for the Bills offense against the Denver defense. The question in this game for me is what version of the Broncos offense are we going to see? They average 23 and a half points per game, but they're coming off a string of incredibly poor performances. So they only scored 19 points against the Chargers backups. They scored 20 points against the Chiefs backups. They scored 20 points when they played Jacksonville. This offense has not been performing well the last couple of weeks. They've been winning games, sure, but like it's been a while since we've seen a proper high flying game from them. And possibly the Bills might be able to put something together here, so they might need to start putting up points. The positives for it is they are rested, so they had the week off. They're going to be ready to go. J.K. Dobbins is unfortunately not going to be back this week, but like I said, we saw how weak this Bills team are against the run. They are the fifth worst team against the run this season. RJ Harvey is only averaging 3.7 yards a carry, but Peyton is not going to make the same mistake that Liam Cohen did. He is going to pound the rock in this game. He's going to run RJ Harvey down the throat. He's going to bring in extra linemen. He's going to bring in fullbacks. He's going to just run everything he can at them and see what happens. Because Peyton is the kind of head coach that if he finds that if he's playing Madden, he finds that there's a play that the AI doesn't know how to defend, he will just spam that thing until he wins, and he won't care about the enjoyment of the game. His enjoyment comes from the winning, and that's what's going to happen here. He is not going to make the same mistake Liam Cohen did. He is going to exploit that, and I don't think that the Bills are going to have a response to it. I don't think they have a way to game plan because Bo Nix is hot and cold, more cold of late, but we've seen that he does have the ability to sling that rock. And if they can establish the run and start getting the play action stuff happening, like this could be a real coming out party for this Broncos offense because this Bills defense, it's just undermanned. This is a bad matchup for them overall. The Broncos should be favored here. Like I said, they've got the roster for it. They're rested. Their strengths match up well with the Bills. It's going to be exciting. But Josh Allen is an X factor that just can't be ignored. And we talked about this going into the Jags game as well. Like I think this rested Broncos exploit the holes in the Bills roster, but a route to success against this Broncos team can be seen how Jacksonville played them 3 weeks ago. Now, look, the Bills defense aren't the same, but you can see what worked for them. You can see what kind of moves work at the wide receiver side if they can find wide receivers. You can see what kind of areas are going to be exploitable in the pass game. You're going to be able to see Trevor Lawrence, as I recall, got a decent bit of yardage on the ground himself in that game. So maybe that's where we'll see where Josh Allen's going to get himself moving. If he's healthy, he's the only way that they have to get through this game. And I just think I'm going to side with the Broncos in this one. Interestingly, the guys have decided that they're going to run vibes based this week. So Ronan and Sean have both gone for Buffalo in this one. And like I said, I could see it. If Josh Allen has his big Josh Allen game, huzzah. But a rested Denver team with this kind of strength against the strengths of Buffalo, I'm going to side with them, and I will Bo-lieve for one week at least anyway. Next up, 49ers at the Seahawks. Seattle are rested. The last game that they played was against this team, who they beat 30-3 and sent them on the road. The question for me in this one really is, has anything properly materially changed since then? Well, the Seahawks are more rested. The 49ers are down George Kittle. So more will probably flow through CMC. But what kind of performance will he be able to get against this high-powered defense? On a positive, their left tackles should be back in for this game for the 49ers, and that might help them out a little bit more. He played last week and played quite well, but yeah, I'm struggling to see the 49ers edge in this one for me. If we were to look at how Seattle might be exploitable, Sam Darnold's issues have mostly been when he gets fast pressure coming towards him. The problem, obviously, that we saw last week is this pass rush from San Francisco is underwhelming. They're not getting quick pressure. They're not getting sacks. So possibly what they need to do is take a slightly different route to piling pressure on Darnold. The way that the Seahawks like to build out this offense is they want to get the run established early and often, and then they want to build a deep passing game off the back of that. So possibly their target should just be shutting down the run, fill the gaps, slow the run game, and force Darnold to put the game on his shoulders. And then maybe that kind of pressure will get to him because we've seen Darnold have bad games. And like I said, they only put up 13 points in their game against them 2 weeks ago, but it's a thin route to them because this is a 49ers team that, as we mentioned, are down players. Their linebacker core is not great. The Eagles weren't able to exploit that linebacker core much last week, but possibly the Hawks will be able to. Like I said, they're going to try the run game at them, so maybe they'll be able to get some guys isolated and be able to push through them. But the tight end Barner will be able to probably run some crossing stuff and cause issues for them. Cooper Cup might be able to get used over the middle a little bit and then use that to either free him up over the middle and exploit those linebackers, or draw on the safeties to get deep shots to JSN. I'll be honest, I'm struggling to think of what the 49ers rooted to this one is. Like, obviously Purdy has been playing well, but Kittle being gone hampers that a little bit. CMC has not been CMC of old. He's still getting his touchdowns, but he's only averaging kind of about 3 to 3.5 yards a carry in the run game, which is not enough to be able to put a game entirely on his back in this one. I think this is going to come down to the 49ers defense, and hopefully they can do it. Like, their personnel isn't there, but they do have the schemes to be able to do it. They know this team very well. They had split the series this year, albeit they were a little bit healthier at that time. Like, it feels on paper this should be Seattle by a country mile, but they could also have a couple of tricks up their sleeve. This is a divisional game. I can't imagine that they had stuff that they could have been doing in week 18 that they kept as a rope-a-dope up their sleeve and said, you know what, we won't show our hand here. We'll go on the road and face the defending Super Bowl champions, and then we'll get them whenever we come back at them the following week after they're rested. So yeah, on form, definitely going Seahawks in this one. The 49ers, they are a quality team. I just think they're maybe not quite as complete. Their hope is the variability in the Seahawks output. What version will we get this week? And can they kind of get Darnold to go into his shell a little bit? That's their only route to success in this one. Sean has decided that he sees that route to success, though, and he's backing San Francisco in this one, whereas myself and Ronan are going for Seattle. Into the Sunday games, Houston at New England. Superpower defense meets exciting but inconsistent offense. One of the league's most aggressive pass rushes in the Texans is landing in. They have 47 sacks on the season, 19 interceptions, 10 fumbles recovered. They have the best turnover differential in the league. They're going to bring the heat on Drake May, who last week took 5 sacks and threw threw an interception against a far milder Chargers crew. He's going to have to get the ball out quickly in this one. And it feels like this could become an issue for them if they can't get the run game going and if they can't get the protection in place. They are a good offense, but an inconsistent one, and that's where the problem is going to land. On the other side, the Texans' offense have been their Achilles heel, and Nico Collins is currently in the concussion protocol. So if he doesn't clear it, they're going to be even worse off because, frankly, Higgins and Hutchinson do not a passing offense make. The Pats have a stout run defense; they're sixth best in the league against the run. So this could end up being quite a low-scoring affair. Like, the Pats are on the road; they are favored by 3 points here. The cap on this game will essentially be the Houston offense, but we've seen individual games out of them. So I'll be keeping an eye on Collins' ability in this one entirely. If he's out, then I think you've definitely got the dogs and the defense for Patriots to be able to cover the wide receivers. And like I said, the run game has been productive of late for the Texans, but the Patriots have strength there. So this could come down to special teams. This could come down to field positioning. This could come down to, it's a pity Ronan's not here for this one, punts. This could come down entirely to who has the better punter. I will say that we have noticed, like, the Patriots kicker has missed, I think, three kicks in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and that is not really where you want to be in this one. The Texans, obviously, Fairbairn's been playing well, though he missed an extra point last week, but he's been pretty money, and he essentially won them their Week 18 game on his own. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think this is going to feel like a much more old school game, a defensive slugfest. Two defensive head coaches here, two exciting offenses. Which one will be able to make the other one crack first? I think we're all going for New England in this one, but Frank, I'm kind of torn because I do think the Patriots are the better team on average here, but I think the ceiling of this Texans team, if they happen to just get something moving on offense, like they could be an absolute runaway train, man. If they could just get this offense going. The smart money is sitting on the Patriots in this one, albeit in a close defensive match that could swing very easily in either direction. And finally, our late game, Rams at Bears. This is very exciting. It's a pity it's on so late, but I will be up and watching it. The Rams have the highest yards per game with the top passing attack and a top 10 run game. They're averaging over 30 points a game, which is 5 points more than the Bears. And the Bears defense does not match up well against what they like to do. They're allowing the fourth most yards per game. They're 23rd in the league in points scored against them at 24 and a half. But this is the thing. The Bears aren't a stats team. The Bears aren't a team that make a huge amount of sense. The Bears are a vibes team. And the question is, can you ride the vibes? 25 points in the fourth quarter against the Packer shows that they can make in-game adjustments and they can turn it on in an instance. And it's not just that game. 16 points against the Lions in the fourth quarter. They are a fourth quarter comeback team and they make for very exciting watching. Nakua and Adams will be key here against this young secondary, which has gotten weaker towards the end of games as well. So the Bears should be allowing points on them. The Bears have struggled to establish the run game in recent weeks, and this front seven is not going to make that any easier on them. But getting that run game going will be key to slowing down the pass rush and giving Williams time to go out and find his receivers. Obviously, the ball seems to be mostly going through the young guys in Loveland and Burton. But if last week is to believe, DJ Moore is back on the menu. So we'll see, can they, help stop this time to pressure stuff, because if he's pressured early and he's flushed out, that's going to be a problem. They're going to need to build rollouts in to buy time. They're going to need to maybe bring in extra blockers or chipping tight ends or something like that to help them. Like on paper, you look at this matchup and the Rams should absolutely win this, but the vibes ride in Chicago, who are at home for this one and riding high, like is somewhat compelling. The Rams are favored by 3.5 points, which feels fair, but they're one of they're one of these teams this year that have had off days. Like they have all the talent in the world. They're great defense, offense, special teams. Maybe their secondary is leaving a little bit to desired, but like overall this is good. But on a cold night in Chicago, could the vibes win out here? I would say this is going to be absolute must-see television for the fourth quarter, because when you look at this season in the NFL, there's only two quarterbacks who have 10 plus passing touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they are Matt Stafford and Caleb Williams. This is going to be exciting. This is going to be a game that you won't be able to write off until the absolute bitter end, because, like we say, even down by three scores, the Bears have come back and won. The Rams have had quarters, halves where they've just turned off entirely. Now, if we get a Rams team coming out that plays like, their heater in the middle of the season where they threw no interceptions for, was it 8 weeks straight and so on, like that's going to be hard to do. The Bears are going to need to get a turnover here in it. They're going to need their defense to step up strongly, and I don't think they have the depth at cornerback and safety to be able to match up with what's going to be coming through the air from the Rams side. But you get a little bit of pressure on there. You get Stafford playing a little bit more like he has the last 2 or 3 weeks. Some mistakes creep in, just a slightly errant throw. The Bears can capitalize on those things, and the Bears are a momentum-driven team. Whether you think momentum's real or not, that's the kind of vibes that they are bringing to this. So I'm not going to ride the vibes in this one. I've been saying that I think the Rams are one of the best teams in the league, and I still think that's the case. And I think a Rams Seahawks NFC Championship game would be a sight to behold and would be great crack. All the team are agreeing with me here. Actually, we're all going for the Rams in this one. But Chicago, I wouldn't count them out. They're at home. They're fun. I just think that it's a little bit too early for them. I think McVay is going to be able to work out how to scheme around the defense that they've got, and I think there are limitations there. In particular, the linebacker core for Chicago is a bit depleted at the moment, and I think that'll be quite exploitable by the tight ends for the Rams, and maybe get that run game moving a little bit, get a bit of misdirection in here. Williams has been better against the rush lately. He's definitely able to kind of move the pocket a little bit and kind of get outside and buy himself time. But will he get flustered? Will the likes of Verse and so on coming after him force him to make a couple of bad decisions? In a game where we're banking on probably one of these quarterbacks is going to make a mistake or two, I think I'm going to go with Williams making the mistakes rather than Stafford. But I expect, regardless of where we end up, this will be a fourth quarter where both teams will be able to put up plenty of points. We might see a 40 plus point quarter. That'll be quite an achievement. But yeah, it's a great slate, I must say. I'm very excited about it. I'm gonna have to work out how to watch the Saturday games because obviously I'll be down in Kerry at a 70th birthday party. For now, it's bye from myself, bye from all at all four quarters, and I'll chat to you next week.